Good afternoon, this is Alan again, and I'm going to try to speak a little more extemporaneously than in the past. As an experiment, I rehearsed by typing some posts up on a couple of readings I did this morning on the Cartomancy forum. And so I'm just going to try to share that without reading from notes as I have been doing. I know I have a tendency to speak slowly and gather my thoughts. So if it's too slow, you can click the icon and speed up the rate of the video if you grow impatient. I know some uh, video makers speak so fast that I have to slow them down. So your mileage may vary, as we often say. So the post that I made and the readings they were based on came from two kind of divine signs that I've seen recently. And um, by sign, I mean a kind of signal from beyond or a message that shows up in synchronicity in everyday life. So the first one occurred, um, and in my recent, over the past year or two, as I've been expanding spiritually, and I've charted some of that uh, progress on that path on my website and in these videos. But over the past couple of years, um, as I've expanded spiritually, it's been not been often that I felt the need to pray for forgiveness um, or go through some of the um, confession of sin that's a staple in Christian religious practice, and probably with a sense of newfound freedom and different focus. But uh, once, uh, fairly long ago, I've just felt um, rebuked, scolded almost by the divine because I'd been angry at a one of the part-time instructors at the college where I teach, and a little judgmental in my heart, and I felt convicted, as Christians say, but a little bit rebuked by deity, and um, kind of had to go through that process of self-examination. Now, I haven't done a lot of shadow work or study into that, which seems a popular practice, but it could be that's very similar to Catholic confession or Christian soul examination and asking for forgiveness. But nonetheless, the second time happened just yesterday, and I had another uh, kind of event of ego that I felt convicted about, rebuked about, without going into the details. Um, I felt that divine rebuke over something I'd done wrong. And very soon after, I saw a piece of pine straw on the floor. And I was reminded of an analogy, a little allegory from years ago, 28 years ago, when I first gave up drinking. And when, um, during a 2-year period, I cried every time I went to a worship service and had major life transformation, changing my lifestyle, becoming healthy, body, soul, and spirit. Um, and I'll explain that in just a minute. But I took that piece of pine straw and put it on my altar, um, remembering all those years ago. Here's what the pine straw represented to me. Um, it represented small things that we can allow in our lives that do great damage. And here's why. 28 years ago, during that life-changing time, I had a job working on a landscape crew in a ritzy apartment complex. And about twice a year, when the seasons changed, we would put in new annual flowers in the entrance. And the trucks would bring in little bedding plants, and we'd till up the ground there at the entrance, and then by hand we'd put in those little flowers. And they came in very small containers. They were just very young, tender plants, and we'd dig a little hole, place them in carefully, and then put new pine straw around them. And we could not let even one piece of pine straw touch those little baby plants, or it would do harm to them. It could do a lot of damage. And so we were very, very careful about that pine straw. Now, in mid-season, months later, as they grew into strong young plants, it didn't matter so much, and we'd trudge through there and doing weeding and watering, and it didn't matter so much about the pine straw. And so it became kind of a symbol to me at that time that in the early stages of something, whether it's a relationship or a new spiritual experience, that small things matter, and we are very careful, and that situation or context is different from when we're more mature, or that experience or that relationship has grown up and become stronger. And so, just for example, during that first year or so, as I was devoting myself to a lot of prayer and study, I didn't watch any TV at all, and went to see very few movies at that time. It was just how I wanted to live and what was beneficial to me during that stage. After that kind of honeymoon period, I began to watch more TV and movies. So this was just an example of a small thing that wasn't necessarily wrong in and of itself, but that was wrong for me at that stage of my life. So when I saw the little piece of pine straw on the floor, actually not too explainable how it got there, and put it on my altar as a memory of that. So one of the readings I did at work yesterday was for evaluation or application of that which was on my heart, that sign of the pine straw. And so I drew a rune and 3 tarot cards. And quite appropriately, the rune stone that I drew was Jera, which is the rune that means harvest. And it can mean cycles, patience, proper timing. It can mean reward from sowing and reaping. And that's very appropriate, of course, for my analogy of the young plants and treating them correctly in each season. As I was shuffling the tarot cards, the Queen of Swords flipped over, and I thought, to me, this the queenly aspect represents divine femininity, motherhood, that nurturing, caring aspect of human personality. And the sword, of course, represents reason and strategy, critical thinking. And so that card also reminded me of either a gardener who's very careful with those baby plants, or a young mother who's very strategic and smart with taking care of those young babies. So that card also fit in with the my reflection there. The three cards I drew were the Two of Cups, the Six of Cups, and Death. And here's how I interpreted those. The Two of Cups represents, to me, of course, harmony in the area of relationships and feelings and the water element. And it's associated, for me, with the High Priestess, the two of the major arcana, and kind of the yin and yang, that balance, or that duality and unity, represented by the High Priestess, her wisdom of having the black and the white pillar, and yet holding everything in balance there. And 2 is a small number, so it's a young stage of the emotions or a relationship. Similarly, the Six of Cups, with its picture of children and the flowers in the cups, is very appropriate to my reflection. And for me, the Six is associated with the 6 of the major arcana, the Lover's card, which also shows two people in harmony, but it's a kind of paradise. And there's the picture there of Adam and Eve and their innocent state. And so here's this young feeling of known joys and gentle sharing here. Very reminiscent of those, and symbolic to me of the same kind of things as those young flowers were in my little allegory or analogy. But what could death be? Well, what is death to these tender young feelings, this new spiritual experience, this new relationship or fellowship? Well, anything, no matter how small. It could be watching TV when it's the season of life for prayer and study. But anything, even something good in the wrong season, could be death to the new beginning and those beautiful, tender new things sprouting up. And so to me, the cards drawn were very apt for my meditation. I think that's long enough for this video, so I think I'll do a separate one on the other reading I did on the other divine sign I've been reflecting on. So let me close for now. Thank you for listening, and take care.